Hello, everyone. My name is Justin Cronise. I am Acquisitions Librarian. I go under Collection Development as well as User Experience at SUNY Erie out in Buffalo at the South Campus. And it's my pleasure to introduce, let me pull up my notes here. We have for Monograph and Serial Acquisition Trends and Tools, presented by Ashley Fast, Director of Collection Development and Workflow Solutions in the Eastern US for GOBI Library Solutions. Patricia Adams is the Senior Collection Development Manager at GOBI Library Solutions, and Frank Durkin, the Regional Sales Manager, Journal Subscription Service for EBSCO Information Services. Just a couple notes before we start. You'll see in the chat, if I can get back there, there's some notes about saving your questions and using them. Please add them into the Q&A section at the bottom. And if you have any comments or clarification, please use the chat for that. And I think we're all set, ready to go.
Okay, thank you, Justin. So welcome to our virtual SUNYLA session, all new for all of us. I talked with a couple SUNY librarians about the most useful topic for this session, and ebooks were at the top of the list. So Ash Fast and I will focus on monograph ebook models and availability, purchasing trends based on GOBI statistics, and options to consider as you make your way forward. I should also mention, for those of you who do not know it, I retire in just a couple weeks. So if I have been your rep, Ash will be your GOBI sales and collection development contact until she completes the hiring and training process. Ash has been with GOBI twice as many years as I have and spent most of those years as a collection development manager, so you're in great hands. Our colleague Frank will round out the session with tools, tips, and reports for serial subscriptions. And after brief closing remarks, we've saved time for your questions. So as Justin said, please enter them in the Q&A.
Can everybody see my screen?
No, we're still seeing the opening screen.
Okay. I wonder if it needs to be switched to where
I see, it says SUNYLA Meeting 2020. It's your slide from GOBI.
Okay.
Yep.
Perfect.
And the poll is still open too. So just if you want me to end it, just let me know when you're ready.
Yeah, if everybody's had a chance, a couple more minutes, you can pop that one down, and then we kind of have one at the middle, and we have an open-ended question that we're going to end with. So as Pat said, my name is Ashley Fast, or Ash Fast, however you want to kind of go by both. I've signed everything Ash when you hear from me. When Pat retires, gosh, it's like, it really is 2 weeks away, or less than 2 weeks away. I'll be taking over, kind of working with schools in New York until I find a replacement, hopefully soon, but all that, I'm excited. I've met some of you guys so far, and for those that haven't met me, my face with a name if you get an email from me on the 30th with a little intro. So I'm going to kind of start scrolling through. We've done our introductions. Actually, Pat, and this slide, we were going to use it to talk about Pat and I in 2 weeks, so we kind of did that already. You were taking the slide, Pat, and I'm jumping in. The agenda slide, do you see it?
Yeah, I already spoke to that slide, so.
We're going to go through it. We're just going to pop down. Just kind of before we get started and jump into the meat of the books part of this, who we are today. EBSCO acquired GOBI in 2015. We were YBP Library Services. Leading up to that, owned by Baker and Taylor, and you still hear me say YBP at times because from years of it being ingrained. But we're happy to be part of the EBSCO family. So Frank works with our serial side of things, and then Pat and I are on the book side, and then we also have colleagues on the database side. I think they talked in an earlier presentation today. It's our 76th year in business, and just kind of, we're a very financially sound and healthy company, DNB rating of 5A1, which is the highest you can get for kind of a small business, but a bigger small business. And so we have, since 2015, done a lot of work when it comes to ebooks and integrating things, both the EBSCO family of products as well as other ebook products into GOBI. And Pat and I are going to be kind of focusing on that over the next few slides.
So first, we're going to take a look at current ebook models and availability. Of the estimated 70,000 titles GOBI profiles each year, how many are available as an ebook? When do they become available? And then recognizing that one size does not fit all, what ebook models are available for those titles? So each year we profile right around 70,000 ebooks. And in 2009, GOBI introduced integrated e-approval plans that allow libraries to define which format they prefer to receive on approval or as SLIPs notifications for a given subject area. And at the start of this service in 2009, we began measuring the availability of simultaneous print and ebook publishing. And we worked hard with publishers and our ebook partners to improve the simultaneous output of print and ebooks. And in 2009, when we started measuring this, the output hovered at 7%. The simultaneous output. Now, 11 years later, the output has grown to 62%. So of the ebooks in this 62%, 90% are published at the same time as the print. So in today's landscape, there's a very small percentage of content that comes out after the fact. But I should point out that 35% of what GOBI profiles is still only available in print. So looking at current ebook model availability among the universe of profiled books, 62% of those print titles we profile have a simultaneous ebook available, and this number is increasing. 38% of the print titles have a DRM-free ebook available, and this percentage is increasing. 28% of profiles, only 28% of profiled titles are eligible for demand-driven, and this number is declining. 16% of the profiled titles have a DDA available for short-term loan, and this percentage is also declining. So you can see that while an increasing number of profiled books are available as ebooks and as DRM-free books, DDA and short-term loan titles are decreasing in availability. I should define here what DRM-free means. That's an ebook with unlimited simultaneous users, so no turnaways for your patrons, no limits on printing, saving, or downloading in a single session, no additional software or logins required, downloaded files do not expire, and in GOBI, we identify these titles with a note that states unlimited user, DRM-free, and we also have spotlight lists so you can find them and search for them as DRM-free titles.
So we're going to segue a little bit into kind of trends we see library purchasing, how they're acquiring ebooks, and look at this over the last few years, and then talk a little bit about kind of where we're forecasting things to go. And I like to call it our new normal because things have flipped very quickly in the last 3 months as we track this on a regular basis. And so as forecast is not set in stone, but it is the trend lines we're seeing as of today over the last few months. So kind of what are this, and these take for granted, my scope is sales through GOBI. So things that our company sells to libraries. Global market trend includes US, Canada, as well as libraries outside of the US. I'm going to minimize my screen a second so I can see all this. So this is since fiscal year 2015, and my fiscal year data is July 1 through June 30th. And so each year we are seeing a little bit of a decline in the percentage of sales of print to e. So in fiscal 15, I should have done the math before I'm talking because I'm going to try to do it off the top of my head. So if I mess up, I'm not great at math. 29% of our sales were ebooks, and that makes it 81% of our sales were print books. So this past fiscal year, we saw that ebook margin grow to 42% of our sales were e, and this is 58, I think, is what that is, percent were print books. So when we're looking at things for this year, so I don't have the full fiscal year 20 data yet, We're close to the end of the fiscal, but we haven't actually done the calculation, and I'm sure it's going to be quite an interesting year, as we've seen majority of schools throughout the US put the print parts of their ordering and their approval plans on hold since early March for the most part. So our print sales this year are going to look different than our current year just because of the pandemic circumstances we're in. And the ebook sales we're seeing are much higher. So if I'm looking at my scope, which is the Eastern US, I've seen a percentage of E2P, just kind of where, I'm trying to think how to word this in a way that makes sense. Basically like for the percentage my print is down, that same percentage of my E is up. So I've seen a flip in some sense. And then when we're looking out into fiscal year 21, we're actually forecasting it to be opposite of what fiscal year 19 was, or close to opposite, whereas 55% will be E and 45% will be print. So we're seeing a really big shift in what libraries are spending with print and E. We think that's going to continue based on how schools are doing a hybrid learning for fall and potentially spring. We have a lot of our campuses in parts of the country that have already said we're all online this fall. And then just the smaller classroom sizes. So resources are gonna just look a little different for access next year. So this one shows ebook sales by access model. So I'll define some of these letters you see at the bottom, just like in library land, we love our acronyms. It seems like, I guess everybody loves their acronyms in all places, but the 1U is a 1 user, 3U is 3 user. Unlimited users, sometimes you see UU there. NLL and CAM, for those who aren't familiar with those terms, so nonlinear lending and concurrent access model. NLL is the ProQuest version, CAM is the EBSCO version. And it basically means you have like X number of uses within a year period, and at the end of those years, that resets. And if you use them up before the end of the year, you either buy another copy or that title's like not accessible until the next year starts. It's usually like between 325 and 365 uses within a year. So you can have multiple people in the book at the same time, but it functions pricing wise kind of like a 3 user. And then STLs for short-term loans, which I'm not sure if you define them or not. We'll define them in a little bit, but it relates to demand-driven models. So in 2016, you can see that we had a lot more short-term loans than we have now. So that's decreased a lot over the last few years. And that is a result of libraries doing away with the short-term loan model, choosing not to use it, or either lowering from like 2 by on the 3rd use to 1 by on the 2nd use. It also directly correlates, as Pat mentioned in an earlier slide, to that option. It declines every year, the number of publishers that put something in the short-term loan model. You can also see the biggest growth is in unlimited user. This also includes DRM-free content. It includes our publisher partner content. So since 2016, we've onboarded a whole lot of new publisher partners to be able to purchase their content through GOBI. And you can see the sales grow in that unlimited user DRM-free model. 1 users have kind of held steady, and 3 users kind of fluctuated a little bit, but pretty close too. We've seen the biggest kind of shift also in less sales in that nonlinear concurrent access model in favor of the DRM-free. So DRM-free impact on publishers. And so I will also, as I go through these slides, caveat everything. This is the DRM-free impact through EBSCO ebooks. Those are the ones that we have visibility into the usage of. So usage for publisher platforms and other aggregator platforms is found on the admin site. So you as a librarian can go in and look at it, whereas we can see how EBSCO titles are being used in general. So this is across the board. We've seen a 30% increase in total sales on those DRM-free titles. We've seen 120% uptick in usage, increase on the unlimited user sales. So note, some unlimited users are not DRM-free. So as Pat mentioned in GOBI, we do note the difference between the two, but there are UU versions with DRM on them still. For usage of those DRM-free contents, we've seen an increase of 26%, and we've seen an increase in 18% in chapter downloads on DRM-free content. This one's super interesting to me for pricing trends. It's like one of the things that as I'm looking at spreadsheets, which I spent all this morning looking at an e-preferred, like what happens if this plan goes e-preferred? And the pricing of it is super fascinating to me. So our average print book price has held steady for multiple years. If you go back farther than 2017, I started in 2008 and it was $85. And so you can see that it hasn't adjusted that much even over the last decade. It's held like right there with the normal inflation rate. The average ebook price for a one user is also holding pretty steady. So we're at like 105, and last year it went up to 109.09, which is not a huge jump, but within like the norm. Where we've seen the biggest increase in price is for those UU ebooks. So as things have gone DRM-free and unlimited user models, you can see that each year the price of those has gone from 137 in 2017 to 151 to 161. That's where you can really see the jump in pricing. And this data is from so the things we profile that have an e-preferred version, this is kind of the averages of those. We added DRM-free aggregator visibility to GOBI in 2018, and so we have seen an increase of sales on those, as well as kind of tracking the pricing, and they are a little more expensive. And just kind of the platform breakdown we have. So we have over 25 platforms available in GOBI. We continually add new ones, usually a couple every year, or a couple new models every year from them. So for instance, we added title by title on Duke University Press, where we just used to sell them in e-collections, and then we added e-collections with DeGruyter, where we just used to sell them title by title this spring. In addition, there's a whole bunch that we call them ebooks in minutes, where a library can buy an ebook in GOBI and within an hour have access. So we just added ProQuest to that option. So it's ProQuest, EBSCO, IGI. I'm gonna blank on the last two, R2 and Digitalia Hispan, I think. Like that, I did not take notes or put notes in front of myself. So these are ebook platform breakdown sales. So aggregators still make the majority of things libraries are picking. That's your EBSCO, your ProQuest, your JSTOR aggregated content, things along those lines. E-collections on publisher platforms are your Springer collections, your Oxford e-collections, and those have grown, not tons, but a little bit every year. And then the most growth is title by title on the publisher platforms, and that is starting to eat into some of the aggregator. So libraries tend to favor, at least trends we're seeing, tend to favor the publisher direct platform with no DRM, and the pricing's a little bit more predictable on some of those than the aggregator at times. I'm gonna hand it back over to Pat.
Yeah, so now we're going to look at GOBI sales data, some statistics to see what kind of purchasing is taking place based on those statistics, starting with some GOBI definitions. And so GOBI enriched data is matched against very detailed library profile parameters, resulting in multiple actions to assist with library acquisitions. The best action is to automatically send the title. We call that an auto ship. To send it in print or as an ebook when the description of the book completely falls within the library's parameters. If not sent automatically, the title may result in a notification. So a library subject specialist can consider for purchase, again, either in print or as an ebook. If a library makes use of demand-driven acquisitions, the discovery pool is often populated by new titles available for DDA among those notification or slip titles. Acquisition takes place after meaningful use by a library user. If a library makes use of DDA and also employs short-term loans, a loan of the title is triggered only after meaningful use by a library user. So what's meaningful use? For most e-suppliers, it's a little different, but it's pretty similar for most e-suppliers. Viewing of the book for more than 5 minutes by an individual patron, copy, print, download a page range or chapter, or a full download. There are additional acquisition options, firm orders, orders for titles requested outside the approval plan process, possibly discovered in a review. And I should say, we don't call, so slip orders or titles that are ordered as a result of sending a slip, we call that part of the approval process. So our definition of a firm order is a title that's required outside that process. You've discovered it a different way. It might be prompted by a faculty or student request or identified in a GOBI spotlight list. And I should mention the newest, in case you haven't seen it, is the anti-racist spotlight. E-collections are defined as perpetual access ebook purchases as opposed to subscriptions from a single publisher. And then evidence-based acquisitions. They're projects with a single publisher or aggregator. And once a collection of titles is determined for a particular library and a minimum amount of funds devoted to the project, the content is made available for unlimited simultaneous user access for a one-year term. The library then selects content for perpetual access equal to the initial commitment after reviewing usage throughout the year. So those are the definitions. Profiling metadata can be used as a tool for simplifying selection workflow. And in return, librarians can rely on the book in hand profiling metadata to help make selection and purchase decisions that fit the needs of their individual institution. So I guess what we're talking about the value of all of this profiling metadata. The metadata in an approval profile for an automatic shipment is the quantifier that allows a library to construct rules around what types of materials are purchased automatically or sent as a slip and then subsequently selected. The 62% section of this graph represents the titles purchased by automatic shipments or by those slip orders directly from the GOBI approval profiling metadata. So, I mean, most of you probably know the value of that, but this is real evidence. We recently completed development work in GOBI that allows us to enhance our profiling capabilities by expanding our profiling attributes and tags. This allows our profilers to add more tags to better describe a book for you.
So I'll pop back in. So kind of putting it all together and making these options work for your library. So I like to think of it as all these pieces of a puzzle. Pat just spent some time defining approval profiles and what those are, and they're crafted to meet the needs of each individual institution. Each one of them is different, whether they send automatic shipments of books, notification slips, feed a demand-driven program. There's a purpose for each one of them, and they're kind of living documents that are managed between the library and GOBI. We have demand-driven programs. I'm umbrellaing this. I'm putting DDA and evidence-based in this. They're both driven by patrons. One is the demand-driven is triggered and used on the spot and pay as you go, whereas the other is kind of one big deposit, for lack of better words, with a publisher, cumulative use through the year, and then librarians pick on the back end. And then we have our firm ordering, which Pat just went into detail with, and e-collections, which is usually like an ebook package, whether on a library level or a consortial level that's deduped with all the different parts of how a library collects. And speaking of consortia, we have e-collections and packages with consortial groups. So a one-time purchase of a package on a publisher platform, such as, for example, the Ohio link does a Springer package where we can dedupe against all the things within Springer on the individual library level, even though the consortia is the one that actually funds that. We have evidence-based programs also with multiple library groups, whether it's a formal consortia or an informal consortia. There's a group of titles up front and a multiplier usually as part of that, and then at the end of the program, whether the group does a group purchase of titles, so we want all these titles and everybody has access to them at the end, or there have been a couple where they purchase them on an individual library level. I think it's easier to do that first part. Or the other kind of, and I would call more common, if not like, I don't know, trendier is a bad word, but perspective collecting within a group of libraries where you're purchasing the E and everybody has access to the E, and then one library or a group of libraries are housing one copy of the print. So if somebody needs it, it's available via IOL. And so that's a way to kind of have broader coverage of content for maybe libraries that wouldn't traditionally buy it or aren't, purchasing it en masse, and it gives that coverage. If I can switch my screen. And so as far as kind of wrapping this up on our books into things before I pass it off to Frank, I thought I would end with like kind of a quick view into the new normal. And I've been using the new normal. I don't know about you guys, but like March felt like 20 years, and then April was like 2 seconds, and then I'm like, it's mid-June, which means July 1st is the start of our new fiscal. It's just been a really, like, time is weird this spring for us. And then there's coupled with the fact, like, I haven't left my house. Well, I say left my house, I mean grocery shop and stuff, but traveled since February. And for the last 13 years, I've never been home for more than 3 weeks in a row. And so it's time has been funny. And so as we're kind of like shifting into the new normal that we're going to be working in the foreseeable future, and I know everybody's like doing their best and making the best of it and having to make these quick, hard decisions for their libraries that 6 months ago, if we would have sat in a room like this, virtual room together and said, we're not going to see each other in 6 months for like multiple weeks, we would be like, whatever, that's just no. So I know there's a shift on campuses this fall and how students are going to interact with each other and interact with the library. And so we're seeing that definitely with our approval plans, in that we've had a lot of schools shift to an e-preferred plan, which provides the ebook ahead of the print book. In doing so, there's also a shift of not physically shipping a print at the moment, whether things are on hold or whether there's been a decision to say, for the time being, our budget doesn't allow us to automatically ship these things to us. And so we're going to have to be a lot more selective in what we purchase. And so the acquisition of, in the sense of approval profiles and ordering, has done a quick shift from P to E as the primary like choice. We've also seen the percentage we sell of P to E shift over the last 6 months. And so that's kind of flip-flopped. And then the other thing that has been super interesting and personally a lot of fun, I love kind of conversations about like, what are you thinking and, you know, what can you do, is the exploration of different user models. So I've talked to lots of schools, and Pat has too. We've had conversations just across the US in general of a school that traditionally bought all print, and now how do you buy E? What's the best way to buy E? Why is this book only available in a one user model and nothing else? And so kind of talking about the broader scope of models and different things the library could do to make the most of what's going to be multiple tough budget years on schools, and how to keep content available for your patrons in a way that's easy to find and accessible. So it's kind of mine. I'm gonna pass it off to Frank at this point and mute myself and be the slide person.
Thanks, Ashley. Appreciate it. You can hear me now? Great. So I did want to talk a little bit about what we are seeing on the journal side of the business as we enter, I'm going to say the new normal too, now that you put that in my head, as we enter the new normal. You can go to the next slide. You know, as I'll just chat a little bit about it. Obviously, the biggest thing is budgets, you know, that folks are talking about, but it's not just, you know, we have to cut, it's the unknown. When are we going back to campus? What is the budget cut? You know, what do we have to work with? So there's a lot of unknown at a time where folks are actually in the time where they would normally be deciding, what am I going to order next year? So I want to talk a little bit about some of the tools that we have that might help you out a little bit during this time of year. One thing that we've been doing in the collection development world is you're looking at cuts, but you're also taking a look at, and folks have time now that they're home, to take a look at everything else that they're ordering. And while some of it's going to be budget cuts, some of it is also going to be moving money from one resource to another, trying to get the most impact for the dollar. So we were looking at, and obviously you have information about your ILL requests, turnaways, usage reports, things like that that you have at your hand to use. And we were trying to figure out what could we do to help with that situation where you're looking at what you order and to try to make sure you get the most value for what you order. So one thing that we have is we were reviewing our database usage, and you could just leave it at this slide for a moment. And basically for the database usage, we're looking at abstract views where a student or a user would go into an abstract where you don't order the full text of it. And now they may ILL it, or they might not like the resource and go use something else, and that's fine. And for a lot of times, you'll notice that the numbers don't stand out. This is a sample of a report. It actually is a real SUNY school. It's the College of Knowledge. Is not a real name. I'm sure you know that. But you'll notice in the example that I'm using, the education collection for this particular publisher has 220 titles in it. This school purchases 6 of those titles. 167 of the other titles that they don't purchase currently full text were attempted to be accessed a total of 7,300 times. So that number stands out. Now, as I mentioned, there's no money trees around and you're not adding tons to your budget, but if you are looking to move some money around from one resource that might not be used as much, this might be worth looking at. Chasing quotes like these, one thing it is free. It doesn't cost anything. And number two is there might be a value. We're seeing some of the larger publishers being very aware of the situation and actually accommodating as far as budgets go, where they might charge what you were charged last year, and then for your additional titles, they might have them at 70, 80, and 90% discount off the list price. So in addition to all the cuts that you have, when you are looking at what else you're ordering, if you're interested in this type of collection development report to go along with all of the other information that you currently use, you just reach out to me and we'll be able to run this for you. We do it on some of the major publishers. That might be helpful to you to take a look at. So we're finding a lot of interest in that because it's not just what are we going to cut, it's looking at everything from a holistic viewpoint and saying, why are we ordering this? Can we use this dollar somewhere better and more efficiently? So we can go on to the next thing. Another thing that we are seeing that is helping some folks out are the EBSCONET reporting. Now, a lot of you may use these things already. I just wanted to talk about a few of them. There's a new report called the 5-year price analysis report that lists all the price you paid for every title you order and 5 years worth of the price history, as well as the format that you've ordered, which might explain a price jump. You could use that for budgeting, of course, as you're trying to predict what the titles that you're going to keep are going to cost. There's also the historical price analysis report, similar report, but it uses a generalized pricing. So it doesn't take into account format changes. It takes into account the format you order now and what that has gone up over the past 5 years. It's more of a percentage report. Even if you haven't ordered a title for 5 years, it will list the 5 years worth of history. So while the price analysis is more popular and new, that other one exists that might give you a little bit more of a percentage idea of what your list would increase. There's a publisher package report that you could use that has 2 tabs. It lists all of the titles that you currently order from a particular publisher. And then the second tab would say, if you added a package or a sub-collection, how many additional titles would you get? That's sort of when you were doing what we were talking about before about maybe moving some money around. There's a license details report, which is very useful now. What that does, it lists all of the publishers' standardized licensing. The important part of that would be perpetual access. If you're looking at titles to cut, perpetual access is an important fact right now as far as what you believe you're entitled to. And then finally, if we could skip to the next slide, the online availability report. This is one that's out there on EBSCONET right now. It lists every title that you have that has a print component, whether it's print only or print plus online. And it lists whether it's available in an online format, and if we have the pricing available, what is the price? So while most folks are looking to cancel print right now, others are looking to say, well, these are the most important print titles that we get. Are they available online? Is it EBSCO's Flipster or is it on the publisher's site? And what the price is. So this is a very commonly ordered report this year more than ever because of what's happening with the print titles. So bear with me. We've also made some additions to the EBSCONET renewals because one thing that, and actually the enhancements were already underway prior to this all happening, but it's very useful now that in the past you could always lean to the cubicle next to you or walk to the office next to you and talk about the renewal, hand off spreadsheets, things like that, where now the folks are we're all at home, we're doing Zoom meetings, emails, instant messaging. So the renewals tool, being able to communicate via EBSCONET with other folks on your team and making it easier to use so that it's not a cumbersome process will help. You can flip to the next screen. We've added some additional functionality which should help make things easier. You'll notice that the yellow arrow is pointing to that renewal items removed list. When you first sign on to your renewal, things that can't be ordered this year, whether it's a discontinued title, something like that, they'll be moved over there automatically. Anything that you cancel, or if you put an item on hold, will be moved into that tab also. And that's a nice feature. You can put titles on hold if you're unsure about your budget. So that way you could send in titles that you know you're going to order and leave the other titles that your budget might not allow on hold until you're sure, one way or the other. The blue arrow, you'll notice, is sort of like an Amazon-y type shopping cart functionality. You'll be able to see the price of things that are in your cart right now, items that you put on hold and canceled, sort of a running total. And then finally, I pointed the little red arrow to the checkout. The little checkout button, it's simplified. It makes it a little bit easier. At the checkout, you can add a purchase order form. You could add a purchase order number. Obviously, for the SUNY schools, we put the OGS number on every invoice, but if you need an additional number, you could put it into that field right there. You could flip to the next screen. Okay, so the next screen, basically this is a little bit down on that page. And this is a particular title. I just picked a random title just to show you some of the features that are available. The little orange arrows pointing to that box. All of the titles are assumed to be renewed unless you touch it. So you only have to touch the titles that you intend on making a change to, whether it's a change in format, canceling them, or doing something else with it. You'll see the blue arrow as pointing to order details. This lists the information about your order that you have, and you could also change any of the fields that are within the boxes. If you wanted to add a POL number for your ALMA or add a fund code, change the quantity, you could do that there. The green arrow is pointing to a tab about alternative formats. So if this was a print title, oh, you can go back to that, please. If it's a print title, you can see if there's alternative formats, whether it's available in Flipster or in an online format. The yellow arrow is pointing to title history. Title history would be if it's changed publishers over the past few years. Maybe it's gone to be a delayed publication for a while, things like that. Order history is a new tab that's interesting, and that's an important tab, as I mentioned, if you're thinking about canceling a title. Order history will list information back to 1995 for this title, as long as you've ordered it with EBSCO. So you'll be able to see when you switch to an online format from print, and that will help you out with perpetual access. And on that tab, it does list the publisher's perpetual access policy. So if you are going to cancel this title, you'll have that information at your hands right there while you're doing it. You know, you hate to talk about canceling so much, but that's unfortunately what we're all looking at right now. The customer notes field, that's a new tab that's in my orders. It's also on the renewal. You can write notes to yourself. You could write notes, you know, cancel this title or do not cancel because of instructor X. You know, demands that we have this. So those are little notes that are internal notes for your system that you can put there. You could look at the renewal time and then carry over to the next year also. And then you'll see the little red arrow, and that's pointing to the blue dot. The blue dot lets you know that this is not an updated pricing yet from the publisher. Obviously, we're in June right now, so a lot of publishers don't have those prices updated. As that blue dot goes away, you know you're working with current pricing. That should help you with budgeting also. So these are a few of the things that we've added that should help you out. And finally, I wanted to mention this link is out on EBSCONET, but I could also send it to you. It's a publisher print resource status. So it'll let you know what the publisher's plans are with the print, when they canceled or held sending the print, when they're going to restart it. Obviously you don't want to have the print piling up too much, waiting there for you to go back to a room full of it. So that will hopefully help you out. That's a resource that's out on EBSCONET now. So Ashley, back to you.
Thanks. So we wanted to kind of wrap up with a question. So we've been talking about book and journal trends and kind of what we're seeing and renewals. So we want to know, how's your institution adjusting to the changes in collection development during the pandemic and then beyond, thinking into next year? We figured we could do this as a free text on the chat box and people could chat. So if you want to answer it, feel free to. Between that and we can all see what everybody's doing. And then if you have any questions for us, I think we have like 5 to 7 minutes left. You can ask them in the chat box and Justin's gonna read them out for us.
You don't have any questions so far, at least that I see.
I don't see any.
Did you see other ones?
No.
Okay.
I can
just making sure. It might take people a moment to write in the chat.
Sounds good.
I have a question here. Can you please expand on the online availability report and how does it work?
Sure, I have to unmute myself. The online availability report is in EBSCONET. So if you order your titles through EBSCO, your journal titles, it will list every title that you have that has a print component. So at any point during the year, but especially now at renewal time, their report will list a title that is print only or print plus online. And then it will also have additional columns as to whether it's available as a combination title, which would be a print plus online if it's a print only, or whether it's available online only. If the publisher's provided pricing, if it's not specialized pricing based on your FTE, that price will also be listed there. So you could sort it based on titles that do have a print, I'm sorry, an online available title. You could also see some titles that don't have any online capability, and that way you know it's either print or cancel. So.
I have another question. Says, what are you hearing from publishers about why the ebook versions are so much higher than print? Do they feel they are losing print sales or something else?
It's a good question. So publishers and aggregators, and mostly it's the publishers, even on the aggregator platform, the publishers are setting the price for the 1 user, the 3 user, the unlimited user model. When you're looking at comparing them, there are certain pub directs that price their ebooks the same price as their cloth. So there are a couple that still do that. That used to be the rule of thumb back like 5 years ago. Unlimited would be the same or multi-user would be the same as a cloth version. That is not the case anymore. We're seeing publisher platforms tend to be the cheaper option than an unlimited on an aggregator platform. They do change the price when they have it on their own versus an aggregator. That said, historically, I know the answer was they were afraid they were going to lose print sales. I don't know if that is still the answer today. They're going to sell whatever version. And we are seeing, as Pat mentioned, the 62% of titles that have an ebook version out when the print is coming is the highest it's ever been. And it is creeping up every year a bit more. There's still a subset of things that are print only and probably will be for a while. Like, it's not going to go to everything has an ebook version next year. But that other than like, I see the pricing and I can tell you off the top of my head what publishers' preferences of pricing are just from looking at data saying like this publisher uses these 2 prices depending on what kind of book it is, and everything's either this price or this price, but I don't know why exactly they're so much higher than print. We have kind of I have these like math equations, and I mentioned I was bad at math earlier, but like a 1 user is usually like 1.3 times of the cloth, and a 3 user is usually like 1.5 times cloth, and that tends to work out pretty, like if you're looking at a big data set, pretty average. And so it's just kind of the way it is these days. I hope that there's some change in that as a result of all this with publishers. But
one thing I did want to say, and I know Ash, you're seeing this too, and probably our participants are seeing it too. The outliers are those titles that are adopted for textbook. And I see 2 different things happening. The one thing that happens a lot is only a single user model is available. And the other thing is the price could go up dramatically. And so those are kind of the outliers. I don't know if you want to say anything more about that, Ash, but those are the ones that I hear about from libraries, particularly as they're trying to respond to reserves and faculty requests. Those are the titles that are being adopted for textbooks, and they're often only available as single user, or the price has become astronomical. And
they tend to be direct to, I say consumer. They're selling them to the students for the class versus selling them to the library to have access to the students. We also see that with any kind of like popular, which you probably notice if you try to order any like books off a popular reading list, you're only going to find 1 user, if anything, because those, I call them like Barnes and Noble type books I go pick up and read, aren't going to be in an unlimited user model for a library. I always feel like
we have some comments in the chat. I don't know if you want to respond to any of those.
They're super interesting. I'm like, it's on the left side. I'm reading them as they come in. Yeah, there's a big disparity in pricing between P and E. It's always been that way, but it's gotten, I think, wider in the last 5 years. I need a publisher to talk about it.
Yeah.
Or somebody that works with, like pricing those books, because it's really we get daily feeds updated in the database, and so I just get to see things that way, but I don't know the rhyme or reason of how the pricing happens.
Good Charleston talk.
I know. I love virtual. I'm not probably gonna travel. Virtual Charleston.
Right.
And I should, so if, I know we're up against time and people have more meetings to go to and everybody needs a little bit break between things. So the slide deck's going to be available. I sent it out to Jocelyn she'll distribute it or post it somewhere is my guess. But I put our contact information down here in the bottom. If you have any random questions that you think of down the line and you want to throw them our way, feel free to contact us. I'll mention Pat's email is going to come to me in 2 weeks. So if you try to email Pat like 3 weeks from now, it'll just come to my inbox. But yeah, I figured we would throw that in there in case anybody had any questions afterwards.
Yeah, and that phone number is wrong too. I don't know where that goes.
I got it from the address book on the company website.
No kidding. So
Pat's
I guess it would be forwarded to me.
Emails or her phone number. I put them
use my email.
But thank you guys for showing up. I know you're all muted and we can't see you and you can see us, but we appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much, Frank, Pat, Nash. Really appreciate it. That was lovely. And
enjoyed it.
Hope everyone has a great rest of the conference.
Excellent.
Right.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.